So I'm in the museum, and they're gonna give us a tour, a private VIP tour. So these are the galleries at the Quilt Museum, and I didn't announce it because I didn't know I could do it, and I didn't know we'd be doing it. But here we go. I'm gonna do my best. Okay.
So, but you're gonna go this summer.
I've already been.
Oh, you going?
Thank you.
I can.
Yeah, I have to go. Of course.
Oh my god. Holy cow.
Before we get settled, we do have the benches, and this tour could go on for a while, so if we want benches, they're nice to lean on, they're really great to sit on during the tour, and I would recommend them, because you know how it is when you're standing and I really get going and I never stop, and you're stuck listening to me, and you want to be polite, so here's some benches.
We have a whole bunch of them just right outside. If you want.
They're super easy
Because there are some
use,
classic
comfortable, and
All you classic types might want to grab one.
I am retired now.
Yeah, I'm a senior citizen. I'll take one.
I'm a classic.
You can do it. You're a classic.
I'm not pregnant anymore.
Oh my god. You guys, can you hear me? Look what it is. Oh my god, it's the quilt. It's like, hi, you guys, can you hear me? Right now? Okay.
I prefer a casual approach to all of the things that I like to do, and so I'm happy to have you chime in or ask questions or make comments as we go. With the classic show, we try to represent the three areas of the collection, and it's very much based on our stunningly beautiful catalog, edited by Ms. Hansen. And so I can't wait for you all to see that. It is such a beautiful publication. So we are looking at three different aspects of the collection. We're in from the studio, so we're looking at our studio art collection. We have the classic show, which is of course our traditional quilts, and then Maren will present New Horizons, which shows the goal of the Jameses to collect on a global level. So that's the basic division of the three shows that we have here. And you'll see with Camillo's brilliant design that he's tied them all in through the use of the beautiful color and all of the different elements that you'll see, the color on the labels. We are so lucky to have Camillo, and if he ever tries to leave us, you are in trouble. Because Camillo is a brilliant designer, and best of all, he really has a good attitude. When I come in and I'm like, oh, when we do everything on our cat designs, and then you come in the space and you're like, it's just not right. As Nancy Crow called it, you need spatial tension in the galleries. And when you don't have it, it's really obvious. And I come in and I'm like, oh, what do we have to do? And I say, Camillo, can we do this? And he always says, of course we can, sure we can. And I really appreciate that, because I do that every single time. But it kind of has to be done. It's just a fact of how, and I warned Camillo when we interviewed, I said, it's going to happen every single time we put up an exhibition, because you just can't read the colors, and you can't, the spacing and just little tweaks like that are what really makes things come together. And Pat Cruz used to say that she'd say, I don't know it until I know it, because she would walk into a gallery and say, it's not right, and then we would move, and then you'd say, that's it. And that's kind of what the process is all about, which you will hear today more about. So from the studio is actually based on the Penny McMorris essay written for the catalog. And Penny McMorris was an advisor to the Jameses. She was hired by them in the late 80s, early 90s to help them develop the studio art collection. And Penny obviously had an amazing eye. What you're seeing here are all quilts that Penny helped bring into the collection. They all date from the mid-80s up to, I think, the newest is 1993. And what was really amazing as I went through these and worked with Penny and got photos together for the catalog was that nearly every person in this gallery, and I think actually every person in this gallery, went on to a long and illustrious career in quilting. So we are looking at some of the people who were the earliest and the most prolific and have become known as kind of the pillars of the art quilt community. And one example of that is, that's so strong, is that when Penny was working with the James collection and selected quilts, ultimately, then we had the 2000 top 100 quilts of the century chosen. We had 13 of the top 100 quilts in our studio collection, or 13 artists. We have about 6 actual quilts that came out of that top 100 of the century. And a couple of them are in this exhibition. Aurora from Michael James is one of the top 100, and then the Faith Ringgold that are back around the corner here. 2 of our, well, the Faith Ringgold are a pair, but these 2 particularly are absolute gems of our collection. I think in these early years, in speaking to these artists and doing the panel discussions, we're talking with Penny, we're talking with Pauline Burbage, whose piece Finn is behind us here, and Michael James. And early on, most of these quilters were coming out of a traditional knowledge of quilts and quilt making. They began that way, but very quickly turned into kind of a whole different artistic approach. Many of them are trained artists. They were looking at things like creating space on a one-dimensional surface, how does color work in quilts, dimensionality in quilts, and like, for example, Judith Larzeler behind us here. I love the fact that it took me, I don't know how long, but I finally realized that this is actually a variation of log cabin pattern. So if you
She's gonna be here.
She started in the center like you do with a log cabin, and she builds it. And look at how she uses those complementary colors and that beautiful orange. Lovely person who
amazing.
So the individuals who were selected for that top 100 of the century are Chris Wolfe Edmonds. This is not the piece that was chosen, but one of our artists, Michael James, Faith Ringgold, Jan Myers-Leoberry, and Joan Lindholm. So that, I think, says in a nutshell just how amazing that Penny was as an advisor.
And no flash photography in the galleries. Thank you.
Anyway, and I asked Penny, I said, we were talking about how certain quilts just have a timeless quality, how you really couldn't pinpoint a date for them. And I said, Penny, what is that quality? Can you tell us about it? She said, I don't really know. But she said they grab you, they grab a hold of you, and there's something about them that is so compelling. And I always feel like that's a real indication for me, of something that I consider not just something good, but something that appeals to me individually, that I can look at it, and as Penny says, the quilt slowly reveals it to you, it reveals itself to you. And I think that is just so absolutely true. I'm not going to talk specifically about the artists. I think Penny has done that in her catalog. There's more information on these artists, and we're going to talk to a few of them on Saturday. I will point out a few things. For example, Michael James, when he was doing his strip piecing, this is the last piece that he hand quilted. Wow. He very quickly went to machine quilting.
I'll get closer.
Pauline Burbage talks about how she was very much enthralled with this really straight edge geometric patterning, but then she has really moved on to what she considers
I'll talk to you guys more. I can't do the chat right now.
Just the last year or maybe 2, we acquired really early pieces from both Penny and Michael, and they are both so just so different than what you would assume their work would be. But it's really fascinating, and that's one of the things that we've tried to do with these pivotal artists, is to develop a collection of their work that represents them over a retrospective. The other piece, the other individual I did not mention that was in the top 100 of the century is Terry Hancock Mangett, and her piece Memory Jars is hanging in the bridge. So you don't want to miss that, and that is such a special quilt for the Jameses. So we put it in kind of the memories of artists area that we're going to be talking about for this 25th show. Of course, Faith Ringgold are some of the most important and significant quilts in the collection. These are really, really early pieces by Faith. She had not. Yeah, let's go back and take a look.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. You guys, it's so exciting. Okay, I don't want to be a nuisance, so I have to hang back a little bit. Okay. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god. This is so cool. Okay, I'll show you more
I know.
when I don't want to interrupt the tour. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
So as many of you know, Faith Ringgold is having a retrospective of her work in New York City right now. Heather and Leslie and I got to see a retrospective of her work when we were in London 3 years ago. Oh my gosh. And I have this fabulous picture of me next to our beach that Heather took, which was just a highlight of my personal and career. I mean, I knew Faith Ringgold before I started working here ages ago. But I think these two pieces, I think really kind of, they are an indication of what was coming up in Faith Ringgold's work, in the story quilts that she did, and in the wonderful quilts that she features all these different individuals, Tar Beach. I can't even name all of her work, but it is interesting because Faith is really, really lovely to us. She lets us use these images. She's very excited when we get in touch to let her know that we're using them. But they were really early pieces, so she doesn't include them in things like her retrospective. Nevertheless, it is so important for us to have these examples. And as you know, we're going to see the Reconciliation Quilt, which held the record for the most ever spent on a quilt at auction when it sold back in the late 1990s or 1991. And that at that time was $264,000. And then, of course, the Jameses purchased it from the dealer after that. But just recently, a piece of Faith Ringgold's sold and beat out our record. So it was sold to the Crystal Bridges Museum for $417,000. But that's good for all of we quilters and anyone who loves quilts, is to see those kind of auction prices on quilts. It's been very exciting because we tried to find Helen Giddens, whose snake quilt is just, it's just such a fabulous piece. Wow. She got married years ago, and we lost track of her, but Sarah Walcott was like, I'm gonna just see what I can find. Searched out Etsy and some of these other sites, and we found Helen. And she was so thrilled that we were still, we were showing her work, and we were still interested in getting her. And even though she has not maybe reached the status of other quilters in this collection, she still is quilting, and she sells work. So that was really fun to find her. Joan Lintolt is someone that we lost last year. She's passed away recently, and her quilts are just phenomenal. I think she just has, I think all of these artists have such a unique voice in their work, and we use that term pretty loosely, but they really did develop an amazing style and a way of their work just constantly evolving throughout their career. We actually hold the largest number of quilts from Michael James and from Pauline Burbidge, which I could not be more thrilled with, that we represent them so well. And Pauline is also having an exhibition right now at the Ruthing Center in Scotland. And every year we try to get to her open studio. You can go and visit Pauline in Scotland during her open studio. Her husband, Charles Paulson, is also an artist, and they open up their whole property to visit. And it's on an old farmstead. And so each little building that was original to the farmstead is either their craft area, one is set up for Pauline's machine quilting, machine quilter. They each have studios, and so they've incorporated that space. And I don't know if Pauline opens her home or not, but I got to go there with Sue Marks, a wonderful supporter of the museum, one year just for a quick afternoon. And when you walk in, Pauline has decorated her home. She's painted on the walls in the same motifs you see on her quilts. It's just the coolest experience. So if you ever get a chance to go see Pauline in her open studio, well worth the time.
Carolyn, how long is that exhibit going? Do you have any idea? Is it like through the summer?
July 10th, I think.
Okay.
I just checked it yesterday.
Cool.
To see if it was still open. Any questions? I would encourage you to come back and look at all the quilts. Jan Myers-Newberry is such an amazing artist, and her painted work. Patrick Dorman was really drawing from international traditions, and so he really wanted his work that he was most done because he was trying to work with traditional techniques. We have a great mind in the
It's hard to know where to go
video
first.
you're going to see on Saturday from Kenny Morris talking about the Duncan Frost and Gail Slade piece. Precipice here, they were so, she said it was so great because artists were so open to anything she suggested, and this was a tough piece that she wasn't sure that they would like it, and they loved it. And she said we chuckled about how it was gonna be great when the piece got to their home and had to go up to the studio. And then she said then when we got actually took up the stairs, we wanted to start chuckling.
Yeah, it's commercial. Really?
So, most of the artists in this collection, we have pursued additional. And so we have been really
She's amazing. God, she's amazing.
and we continue to actually, we just took down before, New Horizons went up, we took down, a new, show, Terry Mangan's work. And so we're acquiring some of the latest.
Yeah, this one. I know, it's true. This one was.
And Terry will join us on Saturday to give the lectures, and she will also be at dinner.
She has been incredibly generous to us. So, we are quite,
Can you just say hi? Because I'm live streaming. That's good. Okay.
but in addition to those two, she's
But yeah,
recently given us.
yeah, this one is iconic. I mean,
She's giving us paintings that go with those pieces. She has just been incredibly gracious and generous. So that's
you are hilarious.
and she has some brand new. Whenever we talk about exhibitions, I just want to remind you that so many of our exhibitions now have that Matterport technology. So when you go home and you say, oh, I'm going to look at that quilt again that I saw and I didn't have time to go back to, go to our Matterport virtual tour, virtual gallery, and you can zoom in on these quilts, you can zoom in on the labels. It's really easy to use it, and I think it's just been a wonderful addition, especially since COVID hit, and we needed to have that, accessibility for people around the world. And I think, we are busier than we've ever been. COVID did not slow us down a step, particularly.
You guys, this one is crazy.
Donation offers come in.
Stephanie Keith, I think the one I just showed you is 87.
She's getting the calls, and she does such a good job.
So,
I don't think we're taking
so
crazy
this
quilts
person,
anymore.
by the way, you guys, this person, Chris Wolf Edmonds, she's been on my list for a minute, and I just can't wait to talk about her. Oh yeah, thanks, Penny.
Last week, gentlemen sent us 3 boxes of quilts that were unsolicited. And I called them up and I said, this is not how it works for us. Everything has to go through policy. And we can't really have the quilts here. They're not covered by insurance. It's a real risk for us. So I need you to get it set up so we can return these to you, because it's 3 heavy boxes. How did it work? Which I wasn't surprised by, frankly.
This is a really famous quilt too.
A quilt that features all these family photos on it. And if he was willing to just let that one go, I kind of got an inkling that we might not hear back from him, which is really a problematic thing for us. When people just drop things off, then it becomes a lot. We do have the right to handle them however we need to, but it's not something that we ever want to do. Nancy's laughing because she knows. She knows.
No, well, it's a stream, but don't worry, I didn't talk about it. No, believe me.
We had one that was a museum.
Okay, here's the
So when we
verbiage.
call, we're like, is this person ever, this person says name, are you familiar with them there? No. She put a museum address on there, never worked there, they had
Oh my God, you guys, it's the Reconciliation Quilt. Okay, I'm gonna wait. We'll go. Okay, here's the.
Any questions for me or anybody on staff as we wander? Well, let's
I
go to
mean,
class.
it's Meg. It's Meg. That's Meg Cox. She's kind of a big deal. And she's a very good friend of mine. And we had a really fun dinner last night. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to catch up with the group, and I can't really talk, when I'm with them, because I don't want to be disrespectful. But maybe you can go back and read that, take a screenshot or something. But we'll talk more about it. Oh yeah, I'm going to see this. Oh, here. Yes, I don't know much about this person. That's pretty cool. I wish I could zoom in, but I don't think I can on this app. Okay, we gotta catch up, so I'll come back. I can't wait to go there. Gotta go check flights to Lincoln this weekend. Yes. So she's starting at the Reconciliation.
Videos, whatever that you were going to post online, Haley just asked me to please tag the museum so that she can share them and spread them further, so that we can even raise the
totally.
more about our.
Yeah, I already shared yours.
She's on the ball. Love it. So, obviously, we had about 1,000 quilts to choose from in the, more than 1,000 in the traditional collection. So my job was to narrow down to 9 pieces, or 10 pieces. Wow. We have in here. We added them in different ways, so I don't even remember the total ones. This has only been out one other time.
What?
Oh my God. It was over at the Sheldon
Did you hear
Museum when
that?
we first came in, because we didn't have a museum back then, so we showed it there, but we've shown it one other time here. And so those are the kind of things that we have to consider. So I started,
literally bowed.
as the curator, I just got to pick up my favorites.
Oh my God, you guys. Did you hear that?
But then I have to go into our database, and because of all of our preservation efforts, I have to look at how often has that been seen? Has it been shown before? How long has it been shown? And that eliminated quite a few pieces that you might have thought were obvious favorites. We bent the rule on my curriculum just a little bit because this was a Ralph James request. I'm sorry he's not here because he has some great stories about some of the quilts in the gallery. Wow. But the Reconciliation has always been what we considered our top value quilt. Nancy Druckmann of Sotheby's in New York City called it the most famous or most prominent folk art piece that had ever come across her desk.
Wow.
And it just has these amazing stories. So that's kind of what I started with, and what I realized as I was going along, and what you'll see in my essay, is that what I focused on are quilts that have great research. Because the thing that I thought was so significant to us as a collection in the museum was that we have contributed so much to the canon of quilt history and quilt knowledge. And I really wanted to highlight that, because when Pat Cruz and I started, we talked about this in our interview, that we had certain facts that we thought we knew, and then as we started looking at quilts, they didn't make sense, and we kind of realized we didn't know anything. We were kind of starting with just some very big, bare bones information. And the research that's been done on these quilts is not my research. I do have, I brought in Mary Kay Walvogel's book. She's the one who did the research on the Century of Progress quilt.
Oh my God.
Behind us is the Century of Progress quilt. Barbara Brackman, in addition to a number of students, have studied my crazy brain and found some great information. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Patricia Cruz and Jonathan Gregory, who you know is now retired, did amazing research on the Reconciliation Quilt. We also had new information from Barbara Brackman. And Barbara Brackman has a wonderful blog, and she just loves to research, so she goes in depth on all kinds of different quilts, and oftentimes uses our quilts from our collection. So she added a lot to this quilt. I just discovered recently this beautiful mathematical star, Star of Bethlehem. I did one of the American Quilt Study Group's know-it-alls programs. I got to be an honorary know-it-all. And Debbie Cooney did research on this quilt and discovered that this is a very regional quilt, that there were multiple ones in the area down in this county. You just go straight down the road. Multiple makers who use that same applique design.
Interesting.
And the Bethlehem Star and the Grandma Carpenter Star, the research on those really comes out of our genealogical task force, who do amazing research for us. They have researched 600 quilts in the collection that have either a maker's name or they are inscribed. So they have done an incredible service by finding these individuals, locating them through census records, birth records, death records, all of these different things. And every now and then we get really lucky and we find out a lot more about why a quilt was made. Or we found about the maker's life. Oftentimes we do things like church records, things like that. We've also done a lot of projects, both the American quilts in the industrial age and American quilts in the modern age were fed by different researchers that we brought in who were expert in different fields. So Virginia Gunn from Ohio State did research on the wonderful applique quilt behind Lauren there. When we first started working with the collection, Virginia Gunn came to visit us and she said, you've got a lot of quilts that are dated incorrectly because they are 20th century colonial revival quilts rather than a true red and green applique. And I said, well, how do you know that? And she said, it's things like the scalloped border, it's the size, it's the fabrics, and I just don't think we had any idea of what the colonial revival meant and how it impacted quilts. I mean, it's a phenomenon of the art world that affected furniture and home designing. It's a huge phenomenon, but it really had an impact on quilts. And it's Olive McClure's quilt, and I have to say, the way she did her applique, the solid figures, it's kind of, I don't know, it just, she just wasn't precious about it, and I love that about that quilt so much. And if you look at that quilt in the upper right hand, you'll see her signature and the date of 1939. So that was kind of one where you kind of went, oh yeah, you know, if this is happening in 1939, all these other quilts from the 20th century are happening as well. So I'm going to go into detail, a little bit more detail on, but just to give you the overall, the basket quilt was one that was just one of Ardis James's favorites. There's not a lot of research on it beyond the fact that it's a classic red and green applique, like I was just talking about. This is what the colonial revival kind of replicated in their own fashion later. But this was one of the last group that the Jameses gave to us because artists loved this one, and so she held on to it until they were actually moving from their home. And it was also on the cover of the Quilt Digest, which was an early publication that only put out like 5 of those. And that's connected to Penny McMorris because her partner who introduced her to the Jameses was Michael Kyle, and he was one of the creators of the Quilt Digest Press. So all these quilts have these wonderful connections between them. So that's kind of how the basis of what we started with here. But of course, the Reconciliation Quilt, and I asked Camilla, I was like, I can't
Somebody
just do
get
a
Molly.
label for these
Tell
quilts
Molly
because there's
she
too
loves
much
this quilt.
information that I want to share, and people don't want to read labels, and they get, you know, we have a certain word limit we're supposed to stick to. So Camilla came up with the fabulous text bubbles, and I love these so much, and I hope we can use these again. And if you didn't notice, they're silver for our 25th.
Oh, nice.
Camilla thinks about all of those details, and so the Reconciliation Quilt is the one we featured because it is such a perfect example of what research can tell you. And we kind of glorify it because we've always said it's our most famous, most expensive quilt. But when you really look at it, when we did the research, we take it out of that kind of glorification of the quilt. And it was a great lesson for me personally to remember. And I think that it humanizes this quilt and quilt making in general in such a unique way. Not always a great way for the poor maker of this quilt. Lucinda Ward Honstein made this quilt. She made it in 1867. It's actually dated there on the ice cream truck. Done November 18th, 1867. Lucinda lived in Brooklyn, New York. And when we first got to know this quilt, we were able to find family members and talk to them about this, and even they had a lot of misinformation in the family about Lucinda Ward Honstein. The family information is that Lucinda's husband had died in war, she was widowed. Well, we discovered that that was not necessarily the case by doing really great genealogical research. And Jonathan Gregory went to New York City and really delved into this quilt and came up with incredible information that we featured here. So Lucinda's husband actually was a cad. There's just no two ways about it. He was a nasty guy. He's probably pictured on this quilt in kind of a favorable way. We think that this block may be Lucinda's husband and her son-in-law. Neither one of them were very good characters. Might also be Lucinda's home here in the center. Maybe that's her husband again. Barbara Brackman likes to always say that she thinks the guy with the big pouch, big stomach on him was Lucinda's husband, and that's maybe a way she could have put her own dig on him. But during the 1860s, when she was actually creating this quilt, was when she and her husband's marriage was ending. And it did not end in a graceful way. So there's stories in the Brooklyn paper, the Brooklyn Eagle, about the Honsteins are at it again. They're out in the street, they're fighting. Her husband is living in a boarding house, and he got in trouble because he was dallying with the 18-year-old daughter of the boarding house owner. It took me a long time to figure out his military records because there were 2 different instances, and we have documentation of both, and it just didn't make sense. And I finally realized that he was thrown out of the army twice. So he originally was hired as a captain in the army, and he was given the task assigning uniforms to individuals or giving them the funds they needed to buy their uniforms. And money for uniforms went missing, and he was court-martialed and thrown out.
Wow.
Well, then a few years later, he signs up for a voluntary New York regime, and they like to wear these WAB uniforms. That was the uniform they created for themselves that they had seen in other armies coming to assist in the Civil War. They adopted that, and he evidently went behind enemy lines, was captured, and that was strictly taboo. You were not supposed to do that. He was captured.
Wow.
He told the story later of how he dressed in a doctor's not a uniform, but a doctor's clothing, and escaped. And this mad story of how he got away with this escape and returned to New York. But Barbara Brackman found that there were a lot of prisoner exchanges going on at the time, so that his whole story was probably just another one of his fantasies that he made up. But he eventually moved to Ohio, changed the spelling of his name by one letter, and told this story over and over again, and presented himself as a war hero. So he eventually married there, then wrote back to Lucinda asking for a divorce. It just goes on and on. So that's the whole history of Lucinda's life. And the irony of it is that it's happening while she's creating this really beautiful piece where looks like she's kind of celebrating her husband by putting him on her quilt. I think at the time, though, if we put ourselves back in the 1860s, a divorced woman was not something that was considered a good thing. She was probably judged for that divorce just as much as he might have deserved it. And so she evidently is presenting a very different story. The other things that are so compelling about this particular quilt is the historic references. Master, I am free in this block. Jeff Davis and daughter. This is just after the Civil War. Jefferson Davis was a controversial figure. He was the leader of the Southern Army, and he was pardoned by the president after he had been in prison for a few years, and that was very controversial in New York. A lot of information in the press. And Lucinda, I think, slavery was ended in New York in the 1830s. So you did not have slaves in New York, but Lucinda's family may have had slaves up to that point because we find some of them in the early census records. And then we find them living in the same neighborhood after that edict. But Lucinda still presents her African American figures on the quilt in a really stereotypical and frankly racist way by portraying them with the large lips, the emphasis on those. So she's still a person of her time, and she's still showing them in a harsh way. But she's also celebrating them. So it's this weird kind of back and forth between these things with Lucinda's quilt. The images of New York City. She's got the Ward Burroughs dry goods store here. That was her brother-in-law's store. That's probably where she got all of her fabrics. You see these crazy animals that she's featured all over the quilt. Elephants, camels, walruses, hyenas, all these different things. Well, about this time was when the Central Park Zoo opened, and there was a couple of organizations where you could go and see these exotic animals in captivity. So that might be part of that story. So we're looking at all of these different kind of elements of this quilt, and you put it all together and you say, this is a human story. This is what Lucinda's life was really like. It was not this picture-perfect image that we think we see in a quilt. When we were at the Sheldon, when we first did receive this quilt, Bob James loved to tell me about this quilt all the time. You wait till you see what we have at home. Wait till you see what we have. He wouldn't tell me what it was. And finally he said, we can't keep it at the house. It's a risk for us. So he sent this quilt out to us in 2001. Wow. And we put it we had it at the Sheldon as a celebration of this beautiful piece. And as we were talking to the docents, they said, well, what about that right-hand row, top to bottom? And I said, looked at it, I was like, oh, if you look carefully, that row is a little bit different than the rest of the quilt. It throws the center block off a little bit. It is part of the original quilt because the sashing goes all the way through to the edge. But we do wonder if at the very end of making this quilt, Lucinda decided it needed to be a little bit larger. So she added that row. There's colors of fabric in that row that we only see there. So that was another little element about it. When we do our genealogical research, we always try to find living members. When we not only trace things back, but we trace them forward. And we found two sisters that, of the family. And so they lived in California. I gave them a call one day. They were both in their 90s. They were lovely women. And they said the quilt actually was another relative's. And when she died, her in-law, the in-law was the one who sold it. They recognized the value for it. And they were so upset that it had left family hands, and they had no idea what had happened to it.
Oh, wow.
So they were thrilled to know it was in a museum and it was going to be preserved. And they said, there's a second quilt that was made by Lucinda, and we have it. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Well, like 3 days later, I got the tiniest box I've ever seen that a quilt could fit in, and it was Lucinda's tulip quilt.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So they sent us that second quilt, which was fabulous. And then, of course, on the other bubble, we have a quilt top that we've seen in a photo, in a quilt engagement calendar. Never seen the quilt. But if you look at the imagery that we have on that bubble where you can see the quilt top, you'll see that the imagery is identical in many cases. The initials on that quilt match Lucinda's daughter. Wow. So we do think that there is somewhere a third piece that relates to these quilts. And I like to put it out every time we can because it's not a finished quilt. It's a top in the photo. So it's quite possible that it exists still because it wouldn't have been used. And we're hopeful that at some point somebody's going to say, oh, I have that, and I know where that quilt top is, and we will reunite all of these quilts. Lucinda and her daughter both were widowed or single, divorced after the Civil War, and they lived on in Brooklyn for many years, but we don't know of other quilts that they made.
How did it get its name?
It got its name early on because of Jefferson Davis and daughter. They called it the Reconciliation Quilt because the story was that Jefferson Davis was, he and his daughter had a falling out over the Civil War and slavery. And so they reconciled, and the story was that they reconciled in New York after the Civil War. Well, when you go back and you look at Jefferson Davis's letters, he was very close to his daughters. He had one famous daughter that went on to be kind of a public figure, but his oldest daughter, who was of an age that could write letters, they're publishing his letters. There's these beautiful letters between he and his daughter. They were not distant at all, but they were separated because he was imprisoned. They did come together in New York City, but it was not a reconciliation of that type. So that's how it got the name. Leslie's giving me the sign. I want to point out one more quote because I just want to give a plug to this to anyone on campus.
Okay, there's one more. There's
Grandma
one more.
Carpenter's quilts are fabulous. There was real mystery when the Grandma Carpenter quilts came in because we had 3 rainbow quilts that were believed to have been made by her. We found out they weren't made by her, but we discovered they were families or they were family members and that they lived in the area. At first, no one had made that connection. You just had to go back a couple more generations. But Grandma Carpenter is known to have made 20 quilts. The family knows a location of 19. And she oftentimes would do this presentation.
Somebody tell Molly on the
And
Discord.
after we did the Know-It-Alls program, I was contacted by a dealer who has 2 additional Grandma Carpenter quilts.
Cool.
And I'm really hoping they're going
That's
to come in the
exciting.
collection because I think if we get those, then we're going to prove to Grandma Carpenter's great-great-great-granddaughter, who has visited a couple times, who has 4 additional quilts. And I think once she knows we are the home to the Grandma Carpenter collection, that those 4 quilts are going to come to us. So I have an ulterior motive for making sure we get the other 2 Grandma Carpenter quilts. And Trish Kerr, who's an amazing scholar, did a wonderful research project, and there's a book that has this whole story of Grandma Carpenter. But we also, I think over here, quoted a great article that was contemporary to Grandma Carpenter that talks about what an amazing quilter she was and that people were coming to her home all the time to see her quilt, to have a quilt for them. She and her husband designed original quilts for all of their grandchildren. So,
I did just want to let you know that we're going to move into the next gallery. The public tour starts in 15 minutes, so we want to make sure that we that our time together.
They don't know I'm coming back.
And you
What's
can
that?
learn a
No,
lot more
I've seen it twice once now. It's just incredible.
Gala, that is your
2002. It's just, I mean, oh my god. Extraordinary. Did you guys hear that it was? How much is it worth? It's gonna be. Well, I mean, didn't they buy it for $415,000? Didn't she say that?
Well, that was another quilt. I don't know if it was.
Oh no, not this one. This was like $263. Okay, I gotta go back. Yeah, right. We'll come back in just a minute.
Come on in, everybody. Please get closer. So much to see in here. We have 21 objects from 17 different countries in this gallery. So it's a real trip around the world through textiles. Carolyn has so expertly introduced you to the first two categories we wanted to make sure we thoroughly addressed in both the exhibitions and the catalog. That would be the traditional quilts that the Jameses collected, as well as the studio art quilts. They were the premier collectors, really, in the 80s and 90s, and we were so fortunate to receive their collections in 1997. But Bob James in particular was emphatic, insistent that there was going to be a quilt for our collection in every country on the globe. And from day one, he encouraged us to pursue that goal of representing the entire world of quilting. I feel very fortunate that I sort of took on the mantle. I was able to, with obviously Carolyn and the acquisitions committee's help, we've been able to, over the last couple decades, really work towards that goal. I think of Bob all the time. I think of his encouragement every day. And Meg Cox, I'll share with the board an article that Meg wrote in 2014 where she interviewed him and she interviewed me and a couple of our researchers that we've worked with over the years about building an international collection. It's really fun to look back 8 years ago, and see where we were at that time, because we have come a long way even since then. So, as I said, 17 countries represented in this gallery. So if we look at the sort of the meta level story in this gallery, and that's what I really think of in this whole gallery is stories. There's so many stories to tell here. There are really big sort of global level stories, and that is the fact that all of those countries on this map are represented in our collection. All of the pink, orange, salmon, persimmon, whatever color you want to call that, all of those countries are represented in our collection as a whole, and then each of the numbered countries is in this gallery. So you can really take a trip around the world by looking at that.
So how many countries now?
In the entire collection, we have over 60 countries represented, with right around 1,800 objects. So that is our global collection, and we are working every day to keep adding to that. It's a never-ending process. It's a never-ending commitment and goal, and we will just keep working at it. As I said, what I love about this gallery is the many, many, many stories that are represented here. We can go down to the micro level, and I love the fact that Lucinda's quilt is practically next to a quilt by a woman named Elizabeth Savanhu from Zimbabwe. They echo each other so beautifully. Lucinda Ward-Honstein was telling the story of her life, her daily life, but also of her community and of her country. And Elizabeth Savanhu this is a story of village life in southern Africa. And Lauren Holt has some handouts if you would like one. We just printed out a few, but I can get more to people. That it tells you exactly what's happening in every single block. She's brewing beer. She's thatching the roof of the hut. She and her husband are going out to collect firewood. It's just the most detailed story of village life, and that's what I love about quilts, is that you get stories that are incredibly micro level. It's the But then you can also look at larger global stories by looking at the quilts in this collection. So, for instance, we have two pieces here that I think echo each other really nicely. Some really beautiful sateen cotton fabrics and gorgeous quilting. This piece is from Italy, from Sicily, actually the island of Sicily, which is off the, oh no, excuse me, it is from Calabria, which is the toe of Italy, which is kicking Sicily. So it's from Calabria, it's surrounded by the ocean, so you see motifs that reflect life in southern Italy. You've got some seashells here, but it also has a motif in the center that reflects the deep Christian roots of Italian culture. It is often referred to as the pelican and her, the sorrows of the pelican. I can't remember the name of the motif, but it's the story of the pelican feeding her own chicks, her blood, in order to let them survive. So it's got obvious parallels to the story of Jesus sacrificing himself for all of humankind. So it's got these great Christian stories in it. It's got sheaves of wheat to show the agricultural life in Italy. And then you've got this more simple piece that is actually from Greece. And the story that I think these two tell together is this format of whole cloth quilts that is so common on the eastern end of the Mediterranean. It really is a lot of the countries that were part of the Ottoman Empire from well into the early 20th century. And this is a style that is still made today all over that region. You can find them in places like Albania, all along the Adriatic Sea, and then even into southern Italy. But this piece is much more recent than this one, about half a century earlier or later, and it was brought to the United States by a Greek family immigrating to the United States, and they had limited capability. They had limited packing. They couldn't bring very much with them, and this is an object they chose to take to the new world, to their new life. Made by a member of their family. It was donated by the grandson, who was just a baby. He was born in Greece, but then came to the United States with his family. And he came to us and said, I don't know very much about this quilt, but it feels like you are the right place to have it. I don't know precisely who made it. I think it was my grandma or my great-grandma, but I think you all should have it so that you can represent Greek quilt making. And so I think it's fantastic. It was our first Greek quilt, maybe still our only Greek quilt. We need to get more. But that's the story that I think these two tell together, is how quilt formats, techniques, styles spread along with cultures that were spreading, whether it's in Europe or in Asia. And so those larger stories are what really pull me in. I love the stories like Elizabeth Savanhu's, where you can really dig deep and find out what her daily life is like, but I also really love looking at sort of larger cultural shifts and how when different groups of people come together, they influence each other. They absolutely, their material culture becomes a representation of how two cultures sort of meet, mingle, negotiate, adapt, adopt. They take on elements of visual culture from each other, and that is what I find really, really fascinating. We made this setup here to display various forms of costume from around the world that display quilting, patchwork, and applique. And I love that they're from all over. They're literally from everywhere. We've got a Japanese patchwork vest, and it's so indicative of Japanese culture, the ingrained motivation to recycle and reuse fabric in particular. Fabric was so valued that you always reused it. You never wasted fabric. And so using even the tiniest little scraps of this shurimen fabric, which is a crepe weave, putting them together, I mean, they are teeny tiny, they're slivers. And so I feel like this garment sort of encapsulates that Japanese motivation to always reuse, recycle, and value textiles.
What's the period check? What does that mean?
So like third quarter of the 19th century. But then you see newer garments, you see a quilted coat from Albania. So again, we're looking at sort of Eastern and Central Europe. The vest in the back, this Chinese silk vest, has an interesting story of fame. It almost became famous in that it was collected by the assistant costume designer for the famous Bernardo Bertolucci movie, The Last Emperor. It won an Oscar back in 1987. I don't remember. I think I wrote it down here. 87. So The Last Emperor, which of course told the story of Hu Yi, the last Qing Dynasty emperor in China. So the costume designer actually collected this, I think, as inspiration for the garments for that movie. And you can see historical photographs of Hu Yi, that last emperor, with his father, and his father is wearing that exact same Manchu vest. So, like, I always just love that little Hollywood element that piece has. And then I think we are getting close to time. So I just wanted to point out Camilo's very subtle but clever placement of our prayer rug. So there are over 2 billion Muslims in the world, and they are united by the 5 pillars of Islam, one of which is praying 5 times a day. And you do that facing Mecca, which is roughly in this direction. So that was Camila's brilliant addition to the exhibition, I think. We are roughly facing Mecca at this point. And this is just a really fantastic 19th century example, very early 19th century example of a prayer rug. And the shape that it takes, or the embroidered shape that it takes up here, mimics the mihrab, which is the niche in a mosque that actually faces Mecca. So what a prayer rug is essentially a portable place of worship, which I think is just brilliant. I mean, prayer rugs take so many different formats. They might be printed, they might be woven, but these quilted versions, I think, are just sort of the creme de la creme. The embroidery is gorgeous, and it also has false or flat quilting, which is a back stitch that I think, for people who aren't super familiar with quilts might look at it and go, hey, isn't that machine quilting? But it's not. It's a back stitch that ends up looking like machine quilting. So it's a fantastic object from sort of a materials standpoint, but also just from a cultural and religious standpoint as well.
Marin, our 11 o'clock tour started in the red and white.
Oh.
So if you would like to continue around the gallery, we were a little concerned about the public tour at 11 starting in New Horizons and then interfering with y'all's ability to hear. So Marin, please continue, and then we can go into the red and white when you're done.
Awesome. Actually, at this point, I kind of wanted to throw it out to everyone here, because as I said, there's so many objects in the room, 21, 17 countries. What would you like to know about? And I guess I was going to couch it in terms of what kinds of stories do you like? I mean, do you like those ones that really dig deep into a single person's life? Or are you a little bit more like me, where I like the sweeping historical epics, where you're sort of looking at a culture and people over time? What are you interested in? Are you like War and Peace or Ulysses? I don't know.
I'm not going to answer that question, that's much too hard. But I'm just so attracted to that gorgeous garment. Can you talk about that for a second?
About the tunic? Yeah, absolutely. It is, when I first walked in and saw it hanging on the wall, it kind of blew me away, because I've only ever seen it flat on the table. That also has a lot of power to it, I think. So it was made by a Sudanese, or it was made for a Sudanese military general. So the Sudan, or that part of Central Africa, of course, like all of Africa, was pulled in many directions by different colonial powers. So the British were fighting over it.
Actually, the Egyptians were also trying to take power there. But the Mahdists were a group, a religious Islamic group who wanted to adhere to the most strict Islamic lifestyle possible. And they were fighting off these invaders. They were fighting off colonialist powers, and the general would wear that. And of course, in strict Islam, you cannot depict any regalia, you can't have imagery. So very much unlike this African piece, which is from West Africa, they would not have any imagery on it. And so these squares are meant to actually make him visible to his soldiers. That's one of the reasons. It's simple because of the Islamic stricture that he would have been following, but it is also a visual symbol to the soldiers under his rule that, hey, here's General, this is the guy you need to follow. And when I saw it on the wall when I walked in, I thought it was going to be bigger. Like I always have this vision of it being like, you know, this is a general's outfit, like who has this power. It's small, like I don't think I can get into it. And yet it still has this, like, you can tell that someone important for that. That's unique. Nancy?
I'm more of an Agatha Christie kind of girl. And I love the story about how the Greek quilt came to the collection. I'm curious how, you know, with 60 countries, you can't travel to all of them, some of them, but how some of the pieces, choose your 2-3 favorite stories of how they came. Either you found them, they found you.
Ask Heather about the jiva. Heather was there when that was.
Oh, well, you know what? Actually, that combines two stories in one. Because I was going to talk about this one. They both came from Mr. John Gillow of Cambridge, England.
Yeah, that fits in Marks and Spencer's bag. That's how.
You guys, how cool is this? Hey, welcome. Waka waka. This is a very special thing that you just walked into.
Yeah, I wanted a jibba for a really, really long time. And so that's one way we build the collection is working with really awesome, knowledgeable dealers. And John Gillow is kind of at the top of that heap. He has been traveling the world since his 50s, 60s days. He is still pretty much a loose and ready to go guy.
Especially when you're in his house.
Yes, I think he's in his early 70s now. And so both of these objects came from him, and like he knows everything about global textiles. He's been there. He's been all over South Asia. He's been all over Africa. And so these two are favorites because he's one of my favorites. And I love this piece. Oh, I don't know how to tell the story very, very quickly, but it was made for a group. The Fonte people are a tribe in Ghana, West Africa. There are dozens of splinter groups of the Fonte people along the coast, the Atlantic coast, and they're often in conflict with each other and with tribes further inland. So they formed what are called asafo, which are military groups, just small local military groups. They serve as military, as protection for their village or their area, but they're also sort of like a social support network as well. They help widows who have lost their husbands. They help orphan children. So it's very embedded in Fonte life. When West Africa was colonized by Europeans started bringing in flags, and there weren't really flags, so to speak, in the Fonte world until that point, but they latched onto the imagery that they saw on these European flags, things like griffins and dragons and these fantastical European creatures. They adopted them and started to make these banners to represent each of their little regimental groups. And the whole idea was to intimidate the other groups. You wanted, so this guy here with his head cut off, he represents a rival group. So you wanted to intimidate the other people, your rivals, as much as possible with these textiles. So they are a highly collectible textile, and when I approached John and said, hey, can you help us get some asafo flags? He said, hey, I can help you with that. And I was thrilled to be able to add this patchwork and applique format to our collection.
Maren, have you been to his house?
Yeah. We do. We have a large Turkish collection. We'll be seeing several of them on Friday morning because we are actively building a Turkish collection. Christine Martins, who is a scholar we work with regularly, is going to be curating a Turkish exhibition. We will be, I have been talking with your friend, Elizabeth Mazar, and she is helping us, and we'll be talking about her in the committee meeting tomorrow. But yeah, we're really looking forward to a Turkish exhibition in 2024. And there will be lots of full cloth quilts, similar to the one in the corner there, because the Ottoman Empire really is sort of home to that style.
Molly, I have a treat for you.
Yeah, and the bar.
Stick around.
Yeah, we'll be talking about them. Chris Martin will be presenting to the panel on Saturday, actually talking about those. Yeah, very, very cool. So, I will wrap up simply by saying that every single piece in here has an awesome story to it. Mary Fons right now is looking at a piece that is the woman who made it, the Pakistani woman who made up her own pattern based on her everyday life, which is obviously like the coolest thing about quilts. They're so reflective of our everyday life. She calls it nose jewel and nose ring. The nose jewel is the red square, and the ring is the black little outline. So I mean, she made a quilt based on her own personal, highly meaningful body jewelry, which
That's cool.
I think that's why quilts are so cool.
Yeah.
And so, I will just wrap up by saying I think quilts from around the world are the coolest thing ever. And I just want to keep studying and collecting them forever. So,
Yay!
thank you.
Yay!
Maren,
And then-
tell me this little tiny head.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
So that's cute.
All the people were really
The-
small back then. Just broadly speaking, like
A
everybody
lot
was
smaller than today.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
smaller.
Although the
Nutrition and all that, I mean, that's why that.
So,
we did last year. Yeah, we have them out.
look at this, you guys. Cook Islands. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna look at the Cook Islands on the Nerd Show. What's that?
I love how you zoom in.
Yeah, well, I'm trying.
Are you doing video?
I'm doing live streaming. You want to say hi to Jonathan Holstein?
Hi, Jonathan Holstein. We miss you.
Yeah, we
Hurry, get over it. Is he coming?
No, he's worried about
Jonathan, you
COVID.
made me sad.
I know.
John was saying, he just, as you know, he says piles of things and he pulls out this like amazing piece after amazing piece out of books and pieces.
This is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. So, hi everybody. So there's gonna be I'm doing a live stream, and so and like 5 people said they're like gonna buy tickets to it. So, but I'll send you the link.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Okay, Molly, are you ready? Yeah. There it is, Grandma Carpenter. I mean, I'm done. I'm like super dead. Super dead. You guys should come. You really should come. I mean, it's just crazy. Oh, and by the way, if you do want to like put an Instagram story or anything like that out right now, we're gonna go see the red and white. There's the red and white exhibit. So yeah, this is the Reconciliation Quilt. Looked at it a little earlier. One of the most famous quilts in the world. Hopefully I'll have time to spend in the galleries. More time to spend. But okay. Oh yeah. Sorry. I have to catch up with the tour. But then this one. See, I gotta catch up anybody who came in. But put it out to your Instagram people that this is happening. I didn't know it would, and Jonathan, I don't know if you're out there. I hope you are. I wish you were here, but I'm doing my best to give folks the tour. Okay. Oh yeah, and then yes, Faith Ringgold. We'll yeah, amazing. God, I hope my battery is fine. Yeah, and if I go live, you guys, and maybe somebody throw up on the Discord. Although I think actually the Discord says if you're on the Discord, like, does it say I'm streaming? That'd be interesting to know. Oh yeah, and this thing. This is insane.
You see the picture of the chairs?
I've never seen it in person. Look at this thing. It's insane. It's insane. It's crazy. Okay, I gotta go catch up. But this is a very, very famous piece. It's all quilted, you guys. It's all quilted. Oh my god, I love it against the orange. It looks amazing. Okay. Oh, wait. This one, insanely famous. Are you ready for this? You're not ready for this. Look at this. Look at the pieces. Tiny. Red and blue jar. And then, okay. See, I like, if people come in now, it's great because I get to surprise them again. I mean, it's really good. It's bigger than what I thought. I mean, I know we have dimensions for everything, but I don't know. I just didn't realize it was quite so large. And this was, I think they said this was one of maybe his first machine quilted quilt, Michael James. Chris Wolf Edmonds will look at her stuff. Oh my god. Oh, and then this one, this was on the cover of Quilt Digest, the fifth and final issue of Quilt Digest. Okay, wow. It's really great. I mean, really, really, lady. Anyway, I mean, this is just like extraordinary. That starshine, it's just like, oh my god. This is definitely one of my favorite quilts of all time, for sure. Oh my god, look. So, yeah, we're gonna do that next. That's the main gallery. We aren't even in the main gallery. So this is, Ardis James. So it's Robert and Ardis James who founded the museum. And this was one of her quilts.
As you walk towards red and white, you don't want to bypass the Ardis James piece and Terry Mangan's memory jars here. Oh my lord, I love it so much.
You can say hi to Jonathan Holstein, he's watching.
Jonathan! Oh, I wish you were here. But we're glad you're here with us in some way.
Indeed.
Oh, how nice of you, Mary.
Yeah, well.
So this is still kind of tied to the 25th anniversary. We just wanted people to tell us their memories. We wanted to honor Bob and Ardis James. And of course, Terry Mangan's Memory Jars is all about that, accumulating memories in a very physical way. So enjoy these. And this is a piece that Ardis did just as just a practice with different colors and understanding how colors work. And Ralph James said he doesn't remember the quilt, but he remembers the little baggies full of cut pieces that you had worked on. And then when you get about here, you got to start looking at that fabulous red and white quilt. And I do have the book Obviously, we chose the kaleidoscope that was on the cover as our graphic design, and we are very, very fortunate to have Deborah Bingham with us, Joanna Rose's niece, who actually attended the show and was involved with the whole process of it.
It was on my spring break. I had to be there every day.
And look at her fabulous jacket.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's so cool.
It's awesome.
I just love it
It's
so
awesome.
much. So let's go on in a little bit closer, and I imagine most people know the kind of the background story of the red and white show.
Yeah, we'll have
We'll trade here.
Yes, we'll trade.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So we'll come around.
Come on around in here.
Nice tour group today. Wow.
That's the Jameses. Artist passed away, but Bob is still with us.
I know the only one I don't think we
my
have
God.
is the airplane. We have an airplane close here, but we have
Oh
an
my
airplane.
God.
So just to give you the brief rundown, and then we can ask questions of Deborah. This is the Joanna Rose Red and White collection. This was featured at the Armory in New York City in 2011 as a birthday gift for Joanna from her husband Daniel. What lovely philanthropic individuals. I've enjoyed getting to know them a little bit so much. And the Armory show was all 651 of the Joanna Rose Red and White quilts, which have now been given to the International Quilt Museum. Obviously, we could fit 651, but with Camilla's help, we tried to design something that had a vertical nature to it, because if you haven't seen the photos of the Armory show, I've got it here. The photos are so stunning. The setup was amazing. And I think one of the greatest things was, like, just the other day we had a visitor who said she was coming from Idaho. She picked up people in Utah on her way.
Look at the letter.
They didn't get to see the Armory show, and they weren't missing it this time.
Oh my God,
And I
it
think on
looks
our
so
social
good.
media, you'll see that the reaction to this show has been astounding. And that's what is such a thrill, is that we're keeping this group together as one group, which is something we try to do anytime we can with actual exhibitions. We have the art quilt, we have the artist in the quilt, we have the abstract design of American quilts. So this fit within our collection so beautifully. And it has been so much fun to work with these quilts. And so if you have questions, Deborah can tell us a little bit more about things, or you can ask her. But I kind of want everybody to walk through and see everything, because I want to see your reactions as we do the show.
Wow. Oh man. Oh my God. I'm going against the grain. Hey, Jamie. Wow. Okay, I better. Well, okay, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna go against the grain so I can talk to you. Oh my God, y'all should come. Let's hang out. Come to Lincoln. Yeah, same, Liz D. Goosebumps. Marianne, hi. Mopping the floor. Listen, you've earned a tour. I didn't, like I said, I didn't know I could do this, or I mean, anyway. So it is a pop-up for sure, but that's why you gotta stay close this weekend, because I'm gonna be able to do some more, hopefully. Well, yeah, I for sure will.
We can't put anything, any supports in our ceiling that we built, so that was not a possibility. So Camilla came up with this amazing design, the vertical racks, the jumble as we call it, the puzzle we put together here, and then we wanted to bring in again the back-to-back quality of that exhibition, the way the quilts were matched back-to-back. So we did that with our X's, as we call them. So it was really cool. And we have not even delved into the whole collection yet.
Oh my God.
Just arrived in
This is the real
October.
Quilt Church, you guys.
And,
Am I right?
So we didn't even have anything in session when we started. You can find all of these quilts plus a few more on our online database already. So we have over 100 up, but we have a lot more work to come before we'll have everything up.
Oh my God.
The 650, we had our largest year ever of acquisitions. So Jamie and Sarah are reeling a little bit in collections, but making amazing progress on getting everything photographed and accessioned. Actually, we were able to, I had worked with Gavin Newsom, who took all the photos. I worked with him on a project for the Brooklyn Art Museum.
Yeah, isn't that the governor?
He's the governor.
Yeah.
No, it's okay, Gavin, what's his name? It's in the second part. Yes.
Anyway, Gavin, the photographer, Ashworth. So I contacted Gavin, and he actually sold us and gave us permission and rights to all of his photos, which was a huge gift to us, because that way we had photos to work with right away, and that was how we were able to create this exhibition by going back.
Because he did photograph every quilt in it, and there was also
It's so good, Leslie. It's so perfect. It's just so good. Yes, threadist. I will ask and make sure. But I mean, the red and white just opened. Sorry to interrupt. How long is the exhibit? This one is up until September 10th. September 10th, you guys, and then how about the artist Robert James? October 29th. And the famous quilt exhibit, October 20th. Thank you. Thanks. October 29th. And you know what? I gotta tell you, if you're not a member of this museum, I really encourage you to be a member. Because obviously, like, they're doing the Lord's work, you know? It's amazing. And they're just amazing. So, you know, museums need members, so join today.
Well, Elizabeth's trying to track down the files. So we'll do.
Oh, I see.
You can buy it online, but I think it runs $800 to $1,000. I mean, you might find it at an obscure spot for less, because occasionally some of these expensive quilt books surface at odd places.
Okay. No,
But if you go on and look at Amazon, I think it's between $800 and $1,000. That's why I'm holding on to it tight.
No, you know what, I looked like 2 days ago, it's between 500 and 1,250.
Oh my God.
And one of my favorite stories from Liz Warren was the Lavinia Rose quilts, which Joanna had 2 different Lavinia Rose quilts in the collection. So this is one. The other one is more damaged, so we couldn't hang it. But Liz did not put them together until the exhibition opened. And then when she saw both of them in the flesh and compared them, she realized they were made by the same person.
Oh, wow.
So the other quilt has Lavinia Rose's name in large letters like Daniel and Amarilla. On our quilt, Lavinia signed it. On this piece, we're showing Lavinia signed it down here. So no relation that we could find, according to the family, between the Rose family who donated the collection and Lavinia Rose, but both from Cortlandville, New York. So we featured some of the special quilts. I used the book a lot to look at the quilts that were featured there. So we tried to make a real connection between the book as well as the exhibition. So we have the Centennial, or the exposition, the Buffalo Exposition. Is it Buffalo? Do I have that right? And all these images of that. It was also well known because it was where President William McKinley was shot and eventually 3 days later died, so it was very famous for that. And so they actually have modified these penny squares that you could buy and embroider. They've actually added it, our martyred president here, and then Mrs. William McKinley, and there's some of these buildings, and then some of these great rides or features from the exposition. So really great quilt.
Anyway, because he was shot at that square was one of the most popular, and nothing to do with, well, not nothing to do with, but I was at the Vermont Quilt Show a number of years ago, and there was a collector who had an sort of exhibit within exhibit, and had 2 redwood quilts, and both had that. She said, because he was shot there, everybody that was doing red work at the time put that square in their quilt because it was a historic moment.
Wow.
I think it's a fun.
So tell us more about how Joanna reacted to that show at the Armory.
The story behind how it came to be was that it was going to be her 80th birthday, and her her assistant had taken, all of these quilts were in one big closet, and Doreen had taken them out and photographed them and put them in an album for her. I think they were Polaroids, but I'm not sure. Basically, just quick pictures, not proper pictures. And it turned out there were 650 of them, and she gave her this huge album and said, I bet you don't know how many you have. It was a surprise. And she said, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And they're all different, because one thing that she was very proud of, she had an extraordinary memory, graphic visual memory, and there were no exact duplicates in the whole collection. She said, I just kept collecting because I wanted to test my memory, see if I in fact, I don't think she went back and looked, but when she looked at this album, indeed there were no duplicates. But so my uncle said, what do you want for your 80th birthday? And she said, I'd love to share the red and whites with the city. And so then began the process of like finding a space that was big enough that could handle all of this, and then interviewing design teams, and they chose Think Design. And it became this incredible show. And she insisted, she did it in collaboration with the Quilt Museum, but she did not want admission charge, period. They, I think, wanted some, it would have been a great fundraiser and so forth, but she says, no, this is a gift to the city of New York from me. And so it was just open. Walked in, and it was a 1 week long, the end of March 2011. And it was word of mouth. I mean, people just, some people went to see it. The first day was kind of quiet, and the tour buses started showing up, all full of quilters particularly. Everybody get a bus, let's go. And they just, by the end of the week, you walked up to the front door, and it was a sea of people with red and white quilts coming from above. And she was there at the opening, she was there. We sat in the cafe while they started taking it apart when the exhibit closed on the very last day. And she said, it was just great. She had a reception was a proud grad. I have a very hard time speaking for her in the past tense. So there's a lot of she's. It's still pretty raw, but she was a proud graduate of Braemar College. She also studied at St. Hilda's at Oxford. College, and she was an incredibly educated, cultured, thoughtful, interested person. She was always interested in what you were doing as a person. In fact, there was always a third degree involved. Everything you were doing, what your children were doing, and what their friends were doing. She came to everybody's graduation until she couldn't. But my graduate school, my teaching graduate school graduation, college, high school, my kids' high school graduations, and she just was really passionate about life, particularly about learning. And I know she likes to say she's not a collector. She was a collector, but she was an acquirer, an accumulator as well, and just loved when she took a liking to something. She wanted to see all the different examples, she wanted to learn about it. She could not sew, and she was one quite sort of proud of that. I don't sew, that is a quilter. I'm like, what? But she would also say, I can't sew, but I know beautiful sewing when I see it. And she collected the red and white quilts, but that was not the only quilt she collected. It was the biggest part of her collection. Other quilts were more for functional use, for beds, things she liked. She has some centennial quilts, which is a smaller, different collection. The cheddar quilts that were exhibited here.
That she also gave to us. When we arrived to pack up the red and white quilt, she had given the cheddar quilts to her granddaughter, and she said, and I'm sorry, Rebecca. And she said, Rebecca has an announcement to make for you. And Rebecca said, Rebecca was a film student, and she came and she did this beautiful video of the exhibition, and she said that Joanna felt that we had shown the quilts in such a beautiful way that she had not seen them displayed so beautifully, and that was one of the big factors in the decision to bring these here. So Rebecca announced that they were going to give us all 32 of the quilts that we showed in the Cheddar exhibition. So
That's so cool.
Well, and I remember hearing about when you guys went to get the quilts, thinking about her memory. I mean, she was fragile at that time, and but hearing from all of you who were out there that she knew exactly how many boxes there were, exactly what was going to the museum, and it was all organized.
And she insisted on watching us get those packed up. Is this going to be okay? She was so involved in the whole day.
Yes, she was a magnificent person. It's hard to encapsulate it in a short. But her impact this was one thing that she did.
Just one of
Just one of so many things, and she was an editor of Partisan Review. She went to St. Hilda's at Oxford. She was I don't know if any of you remember, back Mademoiselle magazine used to have college interns. And we went for the summer, it was a very glamorous thing. She was with the Mademoiselle college interns back then, that was a big deal. And Mademoiselle magazine still existed. But she also raised 4 incredible people who have gone on to do amazing things. She was involved in so many of New York City's cultural institutions, the New York Public Library, Lincoln Center, the Metropolitan Museum, many places. And just, you could say, ask her about anything and she would give permission, except computers. Technology was not pursued.
And no air conditioners in the house even, because at the Hampton.
This quilt with the spinning wheel, this is by a woman named Emma Andres.
Well, yes.
We haven't talked about her on the show yet, but we will. It's a really famous quilt.
But anything else, anything in history, anything to do with languages, the world, she read and read and read and could not get enough. And so happily we all have so many memories of her magnificent everything that it's really wonderful to see this. It's emotional and they're great. So thank you all for doing this because it's impactful. I miss her a lot.
She was a very special person. We had lunch with Daniel, her husband, that day, and Leslie asked how he met Joanna, and he pulled out this gorgeous photo of her carrying his wallet, and he told us the story about how they met, and
Yes.
and then the other, and that was just the most amazing story because she was such an amazing, educated woman, and he was like, he just pinned his eye on her, and she wasn't dating, and he's like, so we're not gonna go on a date, but we're gonna go do this. And she would be like, well, okay. And we're not dating, but I need you to meet my family. Okay. And so I never asked her to do anything because I knew she'd say no. And so, but the other thing that was so amazing is that he was so proud of his family. And they were so proud that all of their children and grandchildren had pursued higher education, higher degree.
Yes.
And he just glowed when he talked about the family. It was really lovely.
On the opening night of this exhibit, they had a family dinner, and it was a quiet, low-key thing. Dan stood up, and he said, it was a wonderful exhibit. There's so many things you can say, but what I am happiest about, and he holds up the napkin from his lap. I am just happy to see the quilts from a different perspective. Because he took her to all those antique shows and flea markets and was holding up the quilt.
That's so cute.
I finally get to see them all from the front.
That's
It's really
so
cute.
sweet.
But they were really avid antique show flea markets, and Brimfield was an annual adventure. And other places. And obviously she started collecting, more and more people came to her with things, but in the beginning she was buying them and they didn't cost anything. I mean, they were just dust-offs. And she loved the graphic quality of them, just that real juxtaposition. And then of course, just in her amazing memory. There is a memory in our family that some people have gotten. My father has it, a cousin of theirs, and it's almost photographic. And hence the interest in pattern and do I have this already, and it's not anything about testing your brain and how much you could educate yourself in your life was a key. But I was there every day during that show. Luckily, it was my spring break, and my kids were old enough to take care of themselves, so I was there every day. I have a lot of pictures, if you want to look, a lot of pictures that I took, and I don't think they've ever gone anywhere. But this jacket, I added something each day of the exhibit at home, so each of these. And this quilt is that one over there, which is actually my favorite on the bottom, the applique.
I see.
And this took a long time.
Hold on.
The whole evening work on that, and it's hand applique. I think they're all hand applique except for this one. This is.
Okay, let's look at the quilt.
It is an amazing collection.
And then after the end, during the exhibit, there are all these panels. If any of you have never know,
Hearts. Nice cleavage on these hearts, eh?
There were these panels that the Quilt Museum arranged, and there were volunteers at the front desk, and they
This one, I love this one, you guys.
different people who she takes as a different panel. She'd sit in the front row, she'd come in, and she didn't know at that point. She was certainly getting better, but she had been off for a little while. And she sat in the front, and they'd say, "What do you think?" And she just, and she would then hold forth, and it was always so interesting, like she should have been in the panel. But during one of those panels, I was talking to the volunteers at the desk who happened to be my quilting teachers from Tuscaloosa. It's not there anymore, Quilt City Quilter in New York City, and they said, I have been for many years in the Dear Jane quilt classes, or the Civil War Revival quilt, that's in the Bennington Museum, and one thing she doesn't have is so in the next 9 months, we made her like Dear Jane. And so that was afterwards. And when, it was an example of how she just doesn't think of herself in this way. We said, we'll come over and want to show you, we have something for you. So she came over with Uncle Dana.
That's in the back of the book.
It's the last
Oh,
book in the
cool.
book. And we said, we want to show you. And it took 35 people to make it, and we had like 12 of them there, I think.
Wow.
And we said, we have something, and brought it out, and gave her, and she says, could we borrow this for the night? We're like, we made it for you. What? You made this? They could not believe that after everything they had done with this incredible exhibit, and we called it Infinite Gratitude, because it was just New York quilters being so grateful that this show had been in the city, and it did not sink in for a while that this was, you sure? You sure? Look at the label, it says it's for you. And so, anyway, that was.
What a lovely gift.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But anyway,
Guys, that one looks familiar. Oh my god, I didn't see it before. Is this like the one? Is this... I mean, remember we looked at this, right? And it looks like the one, right? But is it? I think we decided it's not, but look at the cat. The little cat, oh my god. Little horse, or, it's just precious. Oh wow, petty points. Petty point alert. This looks like a whoopee cushion. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's a paddle of some kind. The anchor is just so fabulous, right? Ugh. This is hard, by the way. These stars, I cannot figure out how to make them look like that. But, they're not, square top. Totally cool. Oh my god, it's so great. Nice cleavage on the hearts. Is this cool or what? So yeah, you should become a member of the Quilt Museum, and you should also subscribe to my channel. It would be great. I bring you very special content. I mean, it's pretty exciting, right? It's pretty, look at the polka dot fabric. Oh my god, it's so great. Stephanie Cake, I know. It's so good. Hey, Ruby Marta. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you came. I mean, that's Marin, and she's really cool. Yeah, amazing. And you know what? Good news. I remembered that I packed a battery. So, I have a battery. Okay, so, and, Echo, so, hi. And it's true. It's one of those moments where, we're learning stuff on Quilt Nerd, for sure. And of course, I'm just learning along with you, and it's so much fun. So, and I encourage you, after the stream is done, the replay is there, of course. And so the plaques, the wall, the labels and stuff, you could just pause it, pause the recording on those. If you want to read them, I'm trying to hold the camera as steady as possible. This quilt is just, oh my god, I'm dead. Ugh. Oh my god, look at this thing. That's ridiculous. That quilt is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous quilt. This is ridiculous. What the hell? Like, whose vision is this? And oh my God, it's so great. Baptist fan, quilting. Come to Lincoln. You guys, my mom is gonna be here for the gala, and all the events are free. I know, COVID and everything, it's like, oh, look at this. It's so crazy. They have so many quilts in this gallery. Like, I didn't even see this schoolhouse quilt before. Anyway, so, I know, Quilty Mouse, oh my God. So, yeah, so, if you can drive. Rod Kirikoff, Barbara Brackman, Penny McMorris, Michael James, Mary Kay Waldvogel, Pat Cruz. It's crazy who's all going to be here to party. And you can be with me. And I'm going to live stream as much as possible from the gala event. And what's so fun is, okay, so you guys, Jonathan Holstein, the great Jonathan Holstein. One of my closest friends at this point in my life. Honored to say. Anyway, he's supposed to be here. He's on the board. But, the COVID precautions just aren't super tight, which makes me very nervous. Like, I don't even want to talk about it. So, but Jonathan is part of our community. And so I'm going to be able to, he can be here, right? Through the power of live streaming. And that's really cool. It's just really cool. So, thanks, Twitch. Now, I've got to plug in my battery, but I think that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna, oh no. Oh, hang on. Okay, I've got to plug in my battery. Lord help me. Oh God, okay. I know I brought it, right? Sorry, you just gotta hang 10. How about I do this? Can I do this? Oh, hi. How's it going? Do I have, okay, I do. I don't know where to look. Okay, let me get this battery. Eric, if you're watching, my darling, thank you for giving me this, which is a battery that I can use to plug in my phone. I'd say the live stream is really strong, right? You don't have any buffering or anything, right? It's funny, we got all this gear, all this special gear to film the expo. And I will use the gear, at some point. But plug that in. Hang on. Oh, I gotta turn on the battery. but I'm just using my phone, y'all. And it looks really good. Okay. Let me just see if that turned on my. No, it's fine. Yeah. So, it's so good to see people. Let me just make sure. I think. Hang on. I gotta make sure this is on.
It's good fun.
Oh, yeah, no, please. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. I know. Well, see, it's good. It's a different perspective, right, on the exhibit. That's Nancy before. She's a really big deal. Okay. So how's it going? Is it going good? Alright. Yeah, so when I was recording, I couldn't, I tried to chat. I tried to do a part of, I tried to participate in the chat, but, couldn't. You are so welcome. You're so welcome. It's so much fun to share it with you. I hope people aren't annoyed. It is weird when you have a camera out, It's a weird thing. People get a little bit weird, but then it's fine, So, you know what? I think that's the end of the tour. So, decent timing. What time is it? Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna have lunch at noon. So it's perfect. Can I do this? I think that's probably not gonna work. So yeah, it's been a gas. And I just can't wait to go live again. And tomorrow morning, Quilt Nerd show at 9 a.m. Central Time from my hotel room, which is amazing. It's my pleasure, Ruby. It's really good to see you. So if I go live, it would be great if you guys told your people, you know, whether you text them or post something on your social media or whatever. You know, it's free. There's never a charge to watch the live stream. And, you know, I mean, yeah, the stream is strong. The force is strong. And this is a special thing. Not a lot of, I mean, this was the tour for the board, you know, so, I mean, you probably noticed it was a private tour. So, yeah, pretty special. That's, you know, those are the head curators at the museum. So we really got a VIP tour. I'm so glad I could be with you and everything worked. Pastrami tacos, oh my God. And yes, and you know what else? Here's one other thing. If you enjoy this stream, definitely subscribe. That would be fabulous. You can subscribe with Amazon Prime and you don't have to pay because you get a Twitch subscription for free every month with Amazon Prime. But if you're a Prime subscriber to my channel, you have to do it every month. It doesn't just carry over. You have to intentionally check the box or whatnot. So make sure you do that so you stay current. If you're a subscriber, you get entered in giveaways. And you know what I could do? How about this? Maybe the gala celebration event will be members only. You know what? I've never done a members only stream. I mean, a subscriber only stream. Let me think about it, but I think I'm gonna do it. I think that it's a really special occasion. So I think that makes sense. I want to give you guys something, you know? My subscribers mean a ton to me, like a ton. It really is encouraging to me. So, yeah, I'm making that choice. I'm making that decision. I'll put it on the Discord, and you get access to the Discord if you're a subscriber, so you will know. But, yeah, it's an invitation-only event, the actual event, so I'll make it an invitation subscriber specific show. Yeah, they just called for lunch. So, okay, so I'll tell you more, and the show tomorrow, 9 a.m. Central Time, I'll be live from my hotel room to just talk about all this stuff. And yeah, the last thing is, if you like this stream, send the link to the recorded, the video on demand, you know, because that's free for everybody to watch too. So if they want to see what this is about, or they want to catch the tour because they missed it, send them the link, and hopefully they'll check it out, and maybe they'll become members too because they want to go to the gala. Okay, gotta go eat lunch. I'm really hungry. Okay, bye guys. Love you.